Welcome to the Rant Live.
Welcome to the Rant, everybody. John Freely's here. Evan Altman there, right there. I'm poking him, but if you're on the podcast, you can't see that. The Cubs just swept the Mets. The first time the Mets have been swept all year. Very Metsy thing.
Super Metsy. Metsy.
It's been weird that they haven't choked yet, and maybe this is the beginning. Maybe they just waited to the very end of the season to choke, but they've got such a huge lead in the wild card that I don't think it's possible. I don't know if they've officially clinched the wild card yet. I saw Atlanta was like.
I mean, in theory, they could lose every single one of the rest of their games, and somebody else could win. I mean, it can't be that big a lead, but like
they've got a good start.
Yeah, I mean, they're Jesus. I mean, you know what's funny? So I was looking at this right because I was like, there's no way the Cubs beat deGrom, and you know they jumped on him and they got some early runs there, and so he's like, since he came back, I think he's 5-2. I think is his record. And he's never given up more than 3 runs in a game. Twice he's given up 3 runs. He's lost both of them because the Mets cannot score runs. Like, that's
sure seems like a player like Wilson Contreras would have helped him out.
Yeah, you think? And that's what
they're stubborn.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was somebody out there. I think Jim Bowden said something dumb. I try not to pay attention to him. I think he might have unblocked me. He blocked me at one point because I continually talk about how he stole money from prospects, and that's why he's not a general manager anymore.
If you unblock somebody, it means you're consciously making the decision. He knows who you are, obviously, because if he unblocked you.
Yeah, or maybe he just went back through his whole list. I don't know. It was weird because, you know, and I still don't know why the Athletic employs him. But in any case, more than likely, he wouldn't be the only one. But it's just like that team they played that series. Tell me that didn't remind you of the Cubs, where they would go 7 or 8 innings without scoring any runs and then hit like meaningless solo homers late in the game to kind of close the gap a little bit. Right, like that. The Mets looked like the Cubs in that game. They were getting beat up by opposing pitchers.
Cubs.
Yeah, they looked like the current Cubs, and in that, well, not really current because the current Cubs ended up beating them. But generally, what we've seen from the Cubs for the last few years, where it's like they'll just get dominated the entire game and then put up a couple of, do a fake rally late, score a couple runs, and it doesn't mean anything. And I'm like, this is a team that's in first place. Like, how the hell how were you winning games when Scherzer and deGrom were out? You can't score runs. Like, it was wild. They could not advance runners with scoring position. They weren't stringing hits together at all. Like, it was just, they had bad at-bats. It was wild to me. And I'm like, how do you know? And then you saw last night, like, the Cubs just jumped all over them. Like, they knocked the pitcher out with 1 out in the first inning. It was great. And then they didn't score again. The Cubs did the opposite. The Cubs score early, and then they're like,
Yeah, they did nothing.
We're good.
They scored 6 runs. It was amazing. In the series, the Cubs starters, I actually looked this up beforehand. I don't know why, but they left 91% of the runners on base. 91%. That's bad if you're a Mets fan, because that means, man, you're not. I mean, the only person that's good did Alfonso had 2-3 home runs. Right? I think he counted for pretty much all their offense.
Him and Ortega, before Ortega broke his finger, I mean, it's like finally the guy, we've been dogging this dude all season because he's, making dumb mistakes on the base pass. Then the bat starts to come along, and then as soon as it does, he breaks his finger. Similar, and we don't know what's up with Seiya Suzuki yet, but similarly, he'd been having some tough times. He's just on fire throughout September, and he might have a broken wrist for all we know at this point, even though he stayed in the game. Yeah. They're losing these dudes toward the end.
Alonso, not Alfonso.
Oh, that too
accounted for all the Mets offense.
Oh, well, damn it, because Alfonso Rivera, yeah, he did. I can't even talk. Yeah, Pete Alonso, and it did feel like they were kind of giving him some cookies there toward the end, except then and then there was the one that he hit he fouled the one, hit it deep foul that almost was a homer,
Samson,
and then he slammed his bat, and him and Samson got into it.
Such a little baby.
Which is funny because that's not a dude that I would, I'm not picking a fight with. He's a huge human being. You know what I mean? That's the last person. And it was funny because
it's not like they're in an alley somewhere. They've got some people that'll step in.
They do. I know, but it's funny because
Easier
Samson's
to
like,
chat.
yeah, it doesn't look good for the game or something like that. Like his explanation is like so corny. He was like, it was like the most baseball dad thing I've ever heard. but it
I
was
was
kind of
glad
funny.
he went after him, though, to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah, show a little fight.
Alonso they just got a little too overboard in terms of whether that ball was fair or foul. It was clearly foul. And then his reaction there at the end was just his poor sportsmanship, to be honest with you. So I'm glad Sampson chatted back. It showed a little spine. Cubs need some spine.
And I mean, and that was the deGrom game. I mean, he effectively outdone. Now, nobody's going to look at those two and then look at, like, if you actually watch it. If you look at the box score, it's a little bit different. But if you actually watch the performances, like, you know, and deGrom definitely gave. I mean, man, Happ jumped on one of his pitches, and there were some issues there. You know, a couple singles, and there was the but there were. You know what else was weird? There were like, was it twice that the Cubs almost got called? Well, like once I think Bodie was called out, right, for running inside the baseline, and the Mets challenged it, wanted to get Hermosillo, I think, on that call, but like the Cubs after that home run from Happ, they small balled the hell of it. It was like single, sack bunt that then, you know, that's where and then another sack bunt. Like, and the thing is, especially with I don't know if that goes away a little bit more with the shift going away next year, but those are the kind of things that a team like the Cubs that doesn't have a ton of power, and they have flashed some of it at times, but I'm surprised they're not trying to do more of that. You know, especially early in the season when they were just awful with runners in scoring position, awful with the free runner on second and extra innings. So that was kind of nice to see. But going back to Sampson, you know, with him going up against deGrom, pitching in New York for the first time, you know, against a first place team, and he absolutely held his own. And I thought what his explanation of that was great, because he's like, I don't have any pressure on me. They're the ones in first place. deGrom's the one who people think is the greatest pitcher in baseball. I mean, I'm paraphrasing him a little bit, but he's like, I don't have any pressure. You know, we're a losing team. They're in first place. I just go out there and let it hang loose. And that, I thought that was great. That's the exact way you need to go into a game like that. It was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it went really well. I mean, the Cubs, they like we mentioned, they swept the Mets. Assad on Monday, the Cubs, okay, just going down the line. Monday 5-2, Tuesday 4-1, Wednesday 6-3. So they hold the Mets to 6 runs over that the entire 3-game series. Assad, 6 innings pitched, a run on 5 hits, 6 Ks. Ortega and McKinstry carried the show there, each of them with a home run. And the save from Brandon Hughes. And Brandon Hughes has been pitching really well out of the bullpen lately. And thank God he's able to come in the 9th inning, because we don't have to see Rowan Wick in there anymore. Ooh. And it's been really nice not seeing Rowan Wick throw meatballs and have them get hit over the fence. And that's good. That's been a positive, that good recognition that David Ross made.
Ooh, yeah. But it's, man, I got to tell you, I aesthetically, I do not like the idea of Mark Leiter Jr. getting a lot of these high leverage late appearances, which we've seen, and granted, the situation is not really high leverage. No, he hasn't been.
The Cubs are throwing a minor league team out there. I mean,
this
is like maybe a AA team, maybe not even.
At times.
Well, I mean, look, Contreras didn't play, Horner didn't play, and Happ played one game basically. In that game, he got a home run. Well, actually, he played he played one game, and then I think he had one at bat in the second game, of which was a home run. And then he didn't play for the rest of the game or yesterday. So,
and what's funny? So, it's I was going to say it shows where this team is at right now that I can't even remember Alfonso Rivas's name. I kept wanting to call him Rivera and Rivero, and then I was like, Alfonso, what am I? Where am I going? Yeah, Alfonso Rivera not going to be at first base. Maybe he will. Who knows? Obviously, I've made it very clear who I think should be at first base next year. But no, I mean, for them to if I want to sound like somebody, they showed pluck, they showed fight, and they jumped on him. Although I think what you're seeing, I mean, we saw like Hermosillo got a big hit last night, and PJ Higgins and. I'm looking at it.
That's my point.
Yeah, like less and less.
Hermosillo's not going to be around next year.
Probably not. I used to think, like, what's funny, like Patrick Wisdom to me had, and I think I've been clear on this, but I'll say it again because a lot of people tend to not understand it necessarily. I've continued to say that Patrick Wisdom would have had prior to the deadline. I thought he was for sure a piece to be moved because he has power. That's really about the only, his defense looked good last year, has not looked good this year. He's not a big time on base guy. He swings and misses a lot. Yeah. But he's got power. The power is a marketable tool. And I figured, again, let's think about a team like the Mets that doesn't have a ton of power. The Padres didn't have a lot of power. Now they went out and made a pretty huge trade there. But there were a lot of teams that were contenders that had really low power numbers. And I'm thinking, hey, that's a guy I'd be more than willing to, I'm not moving a top prospect for him, but you would think that would work out. Again, a team like the Cubs as constructed, and certainly over these next couple of years, particularly if they do go out and sign a big-time free agent, whether that's, a shortstop who slides over to third or a shortstop and it moves somebody else over to third, whatever the case is, I don't know that there's room for Wisdom there. And that's what's tough is that I don't know if he saw writing on the wall, if it's just a coincidence or what, but he certainly has not shown that same knack for really smashing the long ball, you know what I mean? Which is, again, what he's there to do. And if he's not able to really lock down defense at third, he's not a first baseman, right? Like, that's not going to happen next year. So there's a bunch of guys. We talk about this 40-man crunch, and I know everybody wants to talk about who they're going to protect and all that. I'm sitting there going like, there's a bunch of guys, whether the contracts expire or whether you just walk away from them that are on that 40-man roster that I think are expendable for, to be harsh about it.
Well, and the really tough thing is that where you've got these guys that are pitching so well, I mean, you've got I'm getting caught up here because Sampson was DFA'd early in the year.
Yeah.
Right? And then he was DFA'd again by Seattle. And I mean, he's done is pitch. He pitched 6 innings, no runs, 2 hits. I mean, his ERA is, I think it's under 3 or right at 3?
I think it's like 3.5, something like that.
But the Cubs, if you look at the Cubs pitching staff right now, they don't have no one on the staff is above 4 of the starters that are there right now. Kyle Hendricks was not there, but everybody else: Assad, Sampson, Smiley, Miley, and
Stroman.
They're all pitching really well. I mean, since the break, the Chicago Cubs have the 3rd lowest ERA. They've got hold on, I've got it written here. I've got so much stuff written on this piece of paper. I think they have a 3.08 ERA since the break, which is great, right? I mean, it's 3rd best. Now, the bullpen has been terrible. They've got a 4.44 ERA, which is 22nd in all of baseball. But the interesting thing about both the bullpen and the starters is that they are leaving runners on base. When runners get on base, they're not scoring. The Cubs have been very efficient. The starters are 80%, 80% at leaving runners on base. So 80% of the time they do not score. And the relievers are 77.5%, which is 6th in all of baseball against other relievers teams since the break. And so it goes to show that when the runners do get on, they're doing a really good job. And I mean, you got to take your hat off to Tommy Hotovy, who's obviously just done some amazing things here. Can't wait to see when some of the prospects that we have, like Jordan Wicks and some of the other guys, Caleb Killian, come up, because I think they're really going to be at the right place. Next year is going to be super interesting. But where you talk about guys who are going to be on the 40-man, when you start talking about like Adrian Sampson, right? I mean, how do you not keep a guy like that on the 40-man roster? How do you not keep? And I'm not saying Javier Assad is a would be cut necessarily or released, but I mean, there are some guys here that I think maybe the Cubs were thinking wouldn't be part of the 40-man plan that are playing themselves into an argument that they should be. And so that's going to be really interesting. And when does the trades can start, right after the World Series? Is it 3 days after the World Series?
I believe so. Yeah, it's the whatever that is. I don't remember if it's like a 72-hour thing or if it's the Monday. I thought there was something about that changed in the CBA, although I might just be thinking about the dates of the season that had to get pushed back because of the lockout extending for a while into what would have been spring training. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to have a significant effect on, and that's why I think they need to be aggressive in free agency to know what they're going to do with the rest of the roster, right? Like they can't, they can let it play out,
right?
Yeah, because
the thing is that they're almost in a position that other front offices have to know that the Cubs are in this 40-man crunch position, so that when the season ends and they can start making trades, I would assume that they've got some leverage there over the Cubs.
Yeah, I think they may, although, I could also see it, we talk about the value that Adrian Sampson or Javier Assad or someone like that has to the Cubs, ostensibly. That also shows that they've got value to other teams, right? So someone like Sampson, who's under control, who's on a cheap contract, they could be able to move him. And I think it's certainly not the same situation. Maybe it's in the same fruit family. It's not apples and oranges completely, but we talked about a guy like Scott Efros, who had, I felt like, a great deal of value to them as that solid middle to late reliever. You knew what you were getting, but they saw greater value in acquiring a potential impact starter in Hayden Wesneski. Similarly, they might look at that and say, hey, Sampson's been very good for us. However, we know we need to go out and get a top-line ace. We know we have all these guys coming up, and now his value that he's provided is going to be mitigated by him having to work in, a long relief role or whatever, and we've got some others. So they might look at it and say, well, that's someone who we can trade to a team that needs starters and make something work there. So, I could see that happening, although at the same time, we talk about him, we talk about Drew Smiley, again, as guys who, if you look at the rest of the players who are around, and saying, again, I still think Thompson profiles better to me as a reliever, but if you look at Steele and Hendricks and Stroman as the kind of the core three, and then pick one of the rest of that group that, we've mentioned a bunch of them. And if you go out and sign one more guy, at least one, now all of a sudden you're checking off additional spots. Adbert Alzolay is going to be back this weekend, right? We haven't seen him at all this year. Again, that's another guy who I figure slots into more of a relief role. So yeah, I mean, if Sampson, and I think Smiley's in that same, Smiley's worked some of that middle relief swing stuff. I think they're going to want to do what they've always done and have a few of those guys in there, in 3 or 4 that can work that role at least out of the gate to figure it out. But I'm sure they don't want to make any hard and fast decisions, but with the 40-man decisions needing to be made prior to the Rule 5 draft, if I'm them, I'm trying to be aggressive on the pitching market. I'm trying to figure out who it is that I can get in there and at least pencil in my rotation, 6, possibly 7, right? Because you got to account for injuries that for sure we're good going in. If we go into the season with this group, we're good. And then you can kind of go from there on who you need to protect. Some of those guys, that's the Arizona Fall League, right? We saw the pitchers that are being named there. I think a few of those guys are essentially auditioning for a 40-man spot. They're all relievers. All 4 pitchers are sending are relievers. So to me, that indication, I didn't get into it too much in the piece. I don't want to get into too much speculation in one spot, but to me, that signals the Cubs are absolutely, first of all, they're happy with the starters they've got coming up. I think at least immediately, but it indicates to me that they are going to attack starting pitching on the market and get another guy promoted up there. And then they want to go up and see how much they can do with that homegrown bullpen. Was it Morrow? I mean, when's the last time they really spent on a reliever? They've proven time and time again they can go out and build a bullpen out of bubble gum and duct tape.
Morrow's a perfect example of maybe why you don't do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's
he ended up injured and never,
yeah. I mean, he was great when he was healthy for the first half of that season.
Yeah,
and then it immediately fell apart, right? And well, I guess Kimbrel.
It's not like
Kimbrel,
that was unpredictable.
They spent a bunch on Kimbrel.
Yeah, but that was a situation where
right.
It's like
and that was a weird one.
Line guy that you can leverage later
right.
on.
And they didn't they didn't have the draft pick compensation, right? He had to wait that all out with the QO and all that stuff. So there were extenuating circumstances there. And then part of that came about because of Ben Zobrist being on leave, and the Cubs recouped some of that money because he was on the restricted list, and they had some extra cash. So there's a bunch of that. But I mean, as far as Like I can't envision a situation in which they go out and spend big on the bullpen, or even spend moderately on the bullpen. I mean, they've got a ton. I mean, even if you look at Wisniewski and Killian and Wicks, possibly Hers. I mean, who knows? There's other. I mean, Bailey Horn coming up through there. Riley Martin's one of them in the and who's the other one? It's not so much Martin, but I'm trying to think of. But I mean, you've got Eric Ullman up there. You've got Assad. You've got a bunch of guys who've kind of floated around through there. I mean, you could definitely cobble together. You just talked about Hughes. Ethan Roberts got hurt fairly early, had TJ surgery. He should be back at some point next year. You got Manny Rodriguez, who has been a little shaky.
He's been back.
But there are you have the makings, and then again, Jeremiah Estrada. You've got Danny Correa down there. I mean, I could look at just the top end of the organization and say, okay, you've got enough dudes there that you could put together long relief, middle relief, and late relief without having to go out and sign anyone. Obviously, they'll add some veteran arms, but the situation sets up to where if they wanted to, they could conserve their money or reserve their money for a couple of really big splashes and fill in around that with pieces they've already got in the organization.
Yeah, I'm not sure they have a closer. So, I know Hughes has been kind of playing that role here a little bit, but I don't think he's their closer on a team you want to be competitive. I think he's more useful in a role where he's coming in the middle innings or towards the end. Maybe he's an 8th inning guy, 7th inning guy or something like that.
I think Correa and Estrada could fill that role if they're able to settle into it. They could, right? I know that's tough for a young guy, but closer's got to start somewhere. I think they could do it by committee. They could go out and but it's just so tough to spend on that guy. Like they got really lucky with Robertson for the time that he was there, for him to be as good as he was relative to what he signed for. That's difficult. But again, they've proven that they can go out and find those players, whether they're internal or, kind of a reclamation style deal like Robertson was. So I don't have much of a concern. Like you said, the pitching infrastructure, from Tommy Hotovy all the way on down through the system, or really going, above him to Craig Breslow and coming down from there, I think has been great, not only at identifying talent, but, we talk about Sampson. I mean, that's a guy who was giving up tons of hard contact, tons of home runs earlier in his career. That's what really derailed him. And he went through and reworked his repertoire. He changed the grips on his pitches. And that's something that Cubs have done really, really well. We saw, here's another one, Cody Hoyer. He'll be back next year. Right? Like he looked great for the Cubs after coming over in the trade, or very good at least. Didn't look good for the White Sox, looked a lot better with the Cubs and was starting to differentiate. He only threw a sinker. They were working on a 4-seam. Is that something that comes around? But I think finding these guys and looking at, their delivery, their body type, the way they move, and then figuring out how to be able to better tailor those pitches, whether it's adding a new pitch or in most cases, simply tweaking an existing pitch in their repertoire and then helping them to sequence that stuff better, has yielded some really, really good results. And we've seen guys come off the dev list in the minors. They go down, they work on a few things, and they can come back and be better. So I feel really, really good from a pitching standpoint of where they're at depth-wise. If they can, because here's the thing. If you add, and again, I'm going to keep saying deGrom because that's my white whale. I love it. But if you do something like that, it's not just adding one player. Solidifying that then has a ripple effect all the way down through to where, again, you can start placing players in other spots and filling in. So now you start, okay, well, here's the rotation. Okay, well, then this guy, fill out this portion of the bullpen. This guy, go over here. And it does help to solidify so many things. And if you look at a dude like that, like I said earlier, I know there are concerns about his health, but when you have a dude who literally, as long as he gives up 3 runs or less, he should get by. He's probably not going to give up more than 3 runs. So if you score 3 runs behind him, you're probably going to win. It's like Jake Arrieta.
To be fair, the Cubs offense hasn't been real great.
Right. Well, they haven't, but if they go out and add a hit or two.
I feel good about the pitching.
Yeah.
But but I would say on the other side of the ball, there are a lot more questions that need to
The
be
defense
answered.
could stand to be improved just a wee bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, Zach McKinstry, David Bodie. There's a lot of guys that are right now on the team. Alfonso Rivas, Michael Hermosillo, Rafael Ortega. Well, now he's on the 60-day IL. But there are a lot of guys that are on the team that I don't think will be part of the next core for the Chicago Cubs, and so that's where the Cubs are really relying a lot on the minor leaguers they've got, which is fine for now. But that's where they've got to supplement. They have, and we talked about this on the last show, but they've got to go out and they have to get a third baseman. That Matt Mervis will be up next year. I'll be very surprised if he's not with the Cubs to start the season. He should be. And so that kind of, at least helps you there at first base. And then you've got Nico will be back, obviously. Nick Madrigal will probably be at second base. And so, if you've got Correa, Mervis, Madrigal, Horner on the infield, you're feeling a lot better about that. That's for sure. And then in the outfield, what's going to happen with Ian Happ? That's the question. When do we see PCA? I would assume, obviously, he's going to start in the minors somewhere. Probably.
I think late.
AA?
Yeah, he should start at AA. Late next year, to me, is still pretty optimistic.
Possible mid-year call-up, though.
Yeah, I mean, if he is able to, and this is, it feels like a really big if. Although at the same time, this guy is the goods, right? I mean, he's incredibly talented, and with that glove as the carrying tool, I mean that we talk about is that's the thing is his offense has gotten more credit. We'll see a flashy play every now and again.
Yeah.
But I mean, how long's it been? And even Dexter Fowler, he played capable center field, but Fowler was by no means a great defensive center fielder, right? The arm wasn't terrific. He was able to play a lot shallower at Wrigley than he could at his previous stops because he played massive outfields in Colorado and Houston, and it really killed him. So Wrigley gave him a lot of benefit. But I think Crow Armstrong starts at AA. Could he pull a Morel and essentially bounce straight from there up to the major? He absolutely could if he tears it up. But I think they still want to be a little bit more gradual with him because, again, we are talking about a guy who's drafted out of high school. He's still very young.
Yeah.
And I know they want to do that. But, yes, he could come up. But Brennan Davis could be up
and that's
right
the
away.
Other thing. You've got Ian Happ over there in left field, and we mentioned maybe moving Seiya Suzuki over to left. And then what are you going to do with Ian Happ when Brendan Davis comes up, which seems inevitable?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be really surprised if he's not up very shortly after the start of the season, if not to start the season. And so it feels like I love Ian Happ. He's great. I would love for the Cubs to find a way to keep him on the team and to sign him to an extension. But I just don't know where he fits in. If you've got Seiya Suzuki and you're committed to him, you've got Brendan Davis, and then you've got maybe PCA or Chris Morel. I mean, you've got to have a space for
Morel,
right?
Velasquez, right?
Velasquez,
although I really appreciate what Velasquez has done, but sometimes
he hasn't shown.
He hadn't really done much. I mean, the Arizona Fall League breakout.
Flashes.
Yeah. And there's certain guys who
his power isn't there.
Yeah. So I'm not really tied to him. I assume he'll be back at AAA to start next season.
He feels like a guy that the Cubs are going to trade or release or whatever. And
I can see him like
another team. And
he reminds me of
the MVP of the AL.
He's Isaac Paredes. He's Jamer Candelario. That's who he reminds me of. Like a dude who showed some flashes with the major league team, and then who ends up, I think he'll be perfectly fine over time, but way too high on Davis. Who's too high on Davis? Who's high on him? I mean, I know we're high on him, but how can we be too high on a dude who's incredibly talented?
That just don't make any sense sometimes. Well, that happens.
He's an insanely good athlete who didn't focus on baseball until after he got out of high school. I mean, and he's done what he's done in that time.
Have we had this guy on here before?
I don't know. I don't. But I would like to know, but that's way too high on Davis. Too high on him saying that he could start the season in the majors? I don't think that's too high at all, because if not for the little nerve issue, who knows what could have happened for him. But anyways, the whole thing is, like, Hap's only got the year left, and that's what I said. The Cubs were actively trying to move him at the deadline, and they simply didn't get the results that they wanted from that. Yeah. I can't imagine them extending him because, and maybe we talked about this on here before, I think the biggest issue there is he's got tremendous value as a free agent because he's a switch hitter. He's playing excellent defense in left field. He's putting up good numbers. But when you're the Cubs and you're sitting there ticking off this list of top prospects that are all outfielders who will be up within the next year or two, and going, hey, dude, the value, what value Hap has to the Cubs and what the Cubs would be willing to pay him for that is probably significantly less than what he feels he's worth and what he'd be able to get on the open market. I don't think that fit is there.
Like just wrong time, wrong place type situation, right? Where it's just like he's going to fit on a team, and it's going to be a winning team, and he's going to be a part of a winner, and he's going to be a key piece of it. But it just feels like on the Cubs, there's just nowhere to put him, kind of thing, you know. And it's just like with, of course, prospects don't pan out too, and so you know, who knows what Cantor. What are you even talking about, man? Stop it. And so, anyways, yeah, it just doesn't feel like there's a place for him. But as we've talked about with prospects, you know, strange things happen, and there are many times where prospects are, you know, supposed to be a lot of what they are supposed to be, and they just don't end up being it. Zach McKinstry is a perfect example, right? I mean, he was at one time one of the a pretty highly rated prospect in the Dodgers system. And so you never know, right? All you can do is say, yeah, this guy looks good until they get up. And for the Cubs, you know, they've had some pretty good luck with top rated prospects. Obviously, when you look back to 15, 16 with all their prospects who came up and actually did show. And so, you know, I think we have kind of a recency bias due to that. And so I think there's an expectation from a lot of Cubs fans that these prospects are going to come up and be really good.
They've also got a much better development infrastructure and philosophy than they did. But you also can't sit there and say, well, prospects don't always work out, so you're too high on this guy because he's a prospect. It's like there's a vast difference.
Prospects are very valuable. Draft picks are very valuable to Major League Baseball teams. And so
but in order for us to be too high, in order for me to be too high on Davis, it would have to be, I believe he will come in and be Rookie of the Year. I believe he will be the starter from day one. I'm just saying I think it's possible that he could be on the roster from day one. That's definitely not way too high. That's entirely within the realm of reality. Now, if you want to talk about me being too high on somebody, I'll tell you that I think Mash Mervis is the everyday starter at first base next season, that he's in line for Rookie of the Year, because I think he's a dude, and I think he'll be just as good at the next level as what he's been at AAA. I, wrote about him today. I've been name-checked multiple times, baby. Go check the Twitters, man. It's all about me today, baby. No, but it's really not. But it was funny because he did name drop me because they were asking about the nickname. And they were like, he said it came from me, which I was like, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it was neat. Nice. I don't know if I actually made it up or if it was just like one of those kind of like Twitter groupthink things that, somebody said it and then somebody ran with it. But I do think that, and it's become kind of ubiquitous now, although again, I think I've kind of helped to promote that to that extent. And then he saw it on the shirt, and that was, I think, what kind of helped to make it take off. So that was kind of a neat thing. I was like, oh, that's cool, man. Cool. But no, I really do. I still think it's weird that he's going to the AFL, but whatever. It's a different story.
Yeah. So we'll have a lot to talk about in the offseason, that's for sure. So anyways, we got to kind of get it moving because I have an eye appointment. Anyways, the Rockies 3-game series, Cubs at home. This is the second to last homestand. I know it's very sad. And then the Cubs go to Miami, and I'm so sad that I can't go there because I saw a game there earlier this year, and it was awesome. I loved seeing a game there.
Yeah, especially when it's like there's 5,000 people there, and most of them are Cubs fans.
I think it cost me like under $10 for both tickets for me and my son.
Nice.
And yeah, it was like the Uber ride was like $5 from the hotel. It was we were just on a layover, but yeah. So sad that I cannot make it to that game, but it's going to be at Miami, then at the Pirates, and then finishing things off against the Phillies and the Reds with a homestand against those two teams, and then one away. The Cubs are going to be playing October baseball, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody is.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the story. Anyways, we hope you enjoyed the show. That's going to be it for us today. And if you like us, then like us on social media, YouTube, all that other stuff. Check it out. We got lots of content. CubsInsider.com. You might like it.
Maybe.
Anyways,
You might hate it, but either way, you should read
you
it.
might hate it. If you're on Facebook, you're probably going to hate it because most people on Facebook, for some reason, seem to hate like
They hate everything. Yeah.
it's everything.
Pretty
So,
much.
anyways, have a good weekend,
Go.
everybody.
See ya.